The top 10 decks for January will be ranked based on LimitlessTCG.com's point system, which positions each archetype based on how well they have performed in recent major events. Starting with the 11th best deck as an honorable mention, Roaring Moon EX. Roaring Moon's highest placement is 9th place at Stuttgart Regionals, and most recently had 5 Day 2 placements at San Antonio, with the highest place being 49th, piloted by Brandon Bond. Brandon played Town Store and Water Energy, two cards that are not in every Roaring Moon deck. Town Store can be used to find Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, Varseal Stone, and Bravery Charm. Water Energies along with Energy Switches are included to make use of Radiant Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken attack, which can be accomplished by accelerating Water Energies to Roaring Moons with Professor Sada's Vitality, and then Energy Switching them to Greninja. Roaring Moon doesn't have many great matchups, but it is a consistent and powerful deck. Its poor matchups have kept it from being popular and successful enough to be higher on this list, but it has gotten several great placements, including 10th at Gdansk and 9th at Stuttgart. Number 10 on today's list is Chien-Pao Excalibur. Chien-Pao was hyped to be a dominant force in this metagame, but has failed to come even close to the expectations set for it. With a strong start, this deck can realistically beat anything, using Excalibur to accelerate energies to Chien-Pao, Radiant Greninja, or Iron Hands EX. Iron Hands EX improved this deck's matchup against Gardevoir and Lost Zone Box, but also added another moving piece to an already somewhat clunky deck. Chien-Pao has a good matchup against Charizard, so with Charizard's recent incredible performance at San Antonio, Chien-Pao could be finding itself in a good spot for upcoming events. For anyone looking to play this deck, I would still suggest Ian Rob's list from LAIC. It's not trying to do anything extra and is focused on consistency with the small tech of Iron Hands EX and 1 Lightning Energy. Number 9 is Entei V Iron Valiant EX. Entei V Iron Valiant started this format off strong, with Noah Sawyer showing just how far this deck could go, reaching 2nd place at LAIC. It's gotten some other strong placements as well, including top 16 at Gdansk, top 16 at Brisbane, and top 32 at San Antonio. This is an aggressive deck which takes advantage of evolution decks in the early turns by sniping their pre-evolutions with Tachyon Bits and Yoga Loop. Entei V is the main attacker of the deck because of how efficiently it deals damage. Radiant Charizard is also a really efficient attacker as the game goes on, and is really good in this metagame. The most recent high placement by this deck was 18th at San Antonio, piloted by Nicholas Dalziel. Deck lists for this archetype haven't changed too much since Noah's original list at LAIC. Number 8 is Rapid Strike Inteleon and Urshifu. Rapid Strike has been consistently putting up great results at major events, like 10th place at LAIC, 11th at Gdansk, 6th and 7th at Stuttgart, and 9th at San Antonio. Rapid Strike settles somewhere around tier 2, since it doesn't have a gross amount of inherent power, but it does very well against evolution decks like Gardevoir and Charizard, as well as Lost Zone Box decks with tons of small Pokemon. A combination of Inteleon's Double Gunner, Urshifu's Rapid Flow, Alakazam's Painful Spoons, and Metacham's Yoga Loop makes for multi-knockout turns and even extra turns thanks to Yoga Loop. Technical Machine De-Evolution is the biggest upgrade from Paradox Rift for this archetype, allowing Rapid Strike to deal with huge Pokemon like Charizard EX by devolving them down to a much smaller Pokemon. Number 7 is Snorlax Stall. Snorlax Stall has actually had an impressive run of events in the Paradox Rift format, and has been solidified as a real deck in this metagame, boasting a respectable lineup of placements: 7th at LAIC, 1st at Gdansk, 6th and 7th at Brisbane, 14th at Stuttgart, and 5th, 8th, and 10th at San Antonio. The standard build of Snorlax Stall focuses on Snorlax's block ability in combination with Erika's Invitation and Counter Catcher to trap Pokemon in the active. The draw engine of the deck is Rotom V and Pokegear. The Pidgeot variant still focuses on trapping Pokemon, but in addition to Snorlax has Mawile as an option, as well as Luxray V for removing important resources from your opponent's hand. Pidgeot EX and Rare Candy take up space that the standard version uses for Pokegear and extra copies of Supporter, which is a reasonable trade since Pidgeot can search any card you need. Snorlax Stall is in a very volatile spot. It has an incredible matchup against Charizard EX, which just won San Antonio, but it has a borderline unwinnable matchup against Giratina V-Star, which just got 2nd at San Antonio. I'm sure this archetype will continue to do well, but it's scary to have your tournament performance rely so heavily on which decks you get paired up against. Number 6 is Lost Zone Box, and there are several variants of this archetype to go over. We'll start with Turbo Lost Zone Box, which Lucas Jordeo placed 30th with at LAIC. Turbo Lost Zone Box aims to get 7 cards into the Lost Zone as fast as possible to begin using Mirage Gate to power up attackers like Radiant Greninja, Dragon Knight V, Raikou V, or the newest addition, Iron Hands EX. This variant of the deck has fallen off a bit since the aggression of any of these attackers just isn't as impressive as it was a few months ago. Manaphy and Jirachi are common techs in plenty of decks, nerfing Radiant Greninja and Sableye, and there are attackers around like Charizard EX and Giratina V-Star, which withstand an attack from any of your Pokemon. Not to mention that hand disruption in the form of Iono and Roxanne is everywhere, which gives this deck trouble in the late game. Turbo Lost Zone is a viable deck, but likely not the best way to play Lost Zone Box right now. Next is Towards Lost Zone Box, which is being referred to as Toward Lost Zone or Toward Pile. I'm also going to bunch Kyogre Lost Zone decks in with this, since most of the lists I see including Kyogre are also including most of the techs found in Towards lists. This is a very high risk, high reward deck, playing 10 different Pokemon, with 9 of them appearing as only a single copy. 2 of those Pokemon are a 1/1 line of Giratina V-Star, which the deck plays 2 Psychic Energy and 1 Grass Energy for. In addition, the deck plays Kyogre, which is incredibly difficult but still possible to pull off an Aqua Storm with. I suggest this deck to pretty much nobody, since it takes a player of Towards caliber to make any sense of this extremely scatterbrained deck with so many resources to keep track of. Next is Lost Zone Box with Roaring Moon EX, which has a few different popular deck lists. 5th at LAIC, piloted by Brennan Kamerman, which focuses on a Sableye and Charizard core, with the addition of 4 Dark Energy and 4 Mirage Gate to make ample use out of Roaring Moon EX. 85th at San Antonio by Piper Lapine, which uses a Turbo Lost Zone core with Radiant Greninja and Pokestop, and also plays Groudon for a pretty strong attacker, especially for knocking out Iron Hands. And 14th place at San Antonio by DJ Umtuch, using a bunch of different attackers in addition to super effective glasses to take advantage of weakness, especially with Tropius, Minior, and Iron Hands EX. Roaring Moon EX is a viable attacker since it can hit hard with Calamity Storm and instantly one-shot anything with Frenzied Gouging. The more convoluted the deck list, however, the harder it is to play. The final variant of Lost Zone Box is Lost Zone Sablezard, which Christian Fontenot piloted to first place at the Stuttgart Regionals. This variant of Lost Zone focuses on putting valuable damage on the board every turn, using Cramorant, Sableye, and Radiant Charizard, 3 of the most efficient basic attackers available. The teched out Lost Zone deck lists look very appealing to play because of their options and perceived matchup spreads, but if I had to pick one Lost Zone Box deck to take into the next major event, it would be Sablezard, since I believe it's reliable enough to perform really well, and its matchup spread is quite good. The number 5 archetype is Miraidon EX. The Paradox Rift format kicked off with Miraidon EX winning LAIC, piloted by Yuho Kalama, who went on to use the same exact list to place 9th at Gdansk and 71st at Stuttgart as well. Since then, a new variant of Miraidon EX, which only plays a 1/1 line of Flaffy, has been performing really well, with Nick Robinson piloting it to top 8 at San Antonio. Looking at the San Antonio results, the 5 highest placing Miraidons were the version with 1/1 Flaffy and Peony, so I venture to say that this is the variant of the deck to consider for upcoming events. Miraidon's biggest issue is the Charizard matchup, which I suspect players will begin teching Tapu Koko EX for, since Azul's winning Charizard list plays 0 switching cards to get out of paralysis. Number 4 is Mew VMAX, which has 2 variants. Both DTE and Fusion Mew have performed well in this format. DTE Mew had the higher placement at LAIC, Gdansk, and Stuttgart, while Fusion Mew had the higher placement at Brisbane and San Antonio. DTE Mew has a more concentrated focus on disruption, with 3 Judge, 1 Iono, and 4 Path to the Peak. Andrew Hederick omitted Charizard EX techs like Grabber and Luxray V in his top 16 list from San Antonio, using Judge plus Path and Box of Disaster as his game plan against Zard. We see the highest placing Fusion Mew at San Antonio also omitted Grabbers, and played all 3 single price Fusion attackers, Meloetta, Deoxys, and Ice-Q. Since this version will aim to use Alessa Sparkle early on, it plays a little bit less disruption, but still includes 2 Judge, 1 Iono, and 2 Path to the Peak. With Spiritomb being a good tech not only against Mew, but also against Charizard now that lists include Lumineon V and Rotom V, Fusion Strike Mew is likely the better choice right now since Fusion Strike Energy circumvents Spiritomb's ability from affecting Genesect V. Choosing between Mew variants is oftentimes just splitting hairs, however, since I'm sure both versions of Mew VMAX will continue performing well until rotation. Number 3 is Lawson Giratina. Giratina V-Star had an incredible final quarter of 2023, with 20 Day 2 placements at LAIC including 4th place, and 31 Day 2 placements at San Antonio including 2nd and 6th. Lost Giratina functions similarly to Lost Zone box decks, using Comfey and Colress's experiment to put cards into the Lost Zone to unlock Cramorant, Sableye, and Mirage Gate. Giratina V's Abyss Seeking is a crucial part of this deck's functioning, since it guarantees you 2 more cards into the Lost Zone while also drawing you 2 cards. From there, Giratina V-Star's attacks are very powerful and can aggressively run through most boards. Since this deck takes some time to establish the Lost Zone, it's typically playing from behind and capitalizes on that with cards like Roxanne and Countercatcher. Giratina V-Star doesn't really have any awful matchups, although some matchups like Charizard EX and Gardevoir EX are very volatile depending on how successful the opponent is at removing Path to the Peak from play. Giratina is one of the best decks in the current standard format. Number 2 is Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir started out really strong at LAIC, placing 3rd, 6th, and 8th, and hit a low point in San Antonio with a ton of people making it into Day 2 with the deck, but nobody converting past top 32. Gardevoir is one of the slowest to set up decks in the format, but it's nearly unstoppable once it stabilizes. Like Giratina, Gardevoir is comfortable when playing from a losing position to activate Reversal Energy and Countercatcher, as well as to be on the advantageous side of Iono. Gardevoir is one of, if not the most, inherently strong deck in the format. It can struggle against aggressive strategies like Fusion Strike Mew or Charizard EX with Delphox V or multiple Lost Cities, but generally can find a win condition to reach for in most situations. And the number 1 deck this month is Charizard EX. Charizard EX Pidgeot had an astounding performance at San Antonio, with Azul, Grant, and Caleb placing 1st, 4th, and 19th, all with the same deck list. Interestingly, Azul's first place list played 0 ways to beat Snorlax Stall, and there were 2 Snorlaxes in top cut, so this is just a testament to not tech for every matchup. It's often more efficient to hope to dodge your auto loss than to tech for it and have the tech stuck in your deck for the entire tournament. Charizard EX is an overpowered card no matter how you look at it. 330 HP, hits Guardian Mew for weakness, attacks for 2 energy, and attaches energy to anything including itself. The only thing that really stops this deck is Path to the Peak or TMD Evolution. I expect this deck to continue doing very well for the remainder of the format, but be aware of its shortcomings against Stall and Rapid Strike because no deck is perfect. I hope you enjoyed today's video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can find coupon codes and affiliate links in the description down below, which help support my content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.